Welcome to another episode of Jibreel Talks Comics. This is for the week of August 12th. Very excited for the show. We have a really solid poll list from some of my favorite titles out right now. Super solid recommendations that are going to be coming for next week as well. It's going to be a massive week next week. So I'm very excited to kind of get into all this. No stories this week, so definitely going to be hard on the books. We're going to talk about all the different stories that have come out this week. A lot of major stories, Fall of X, ASM, everything's moving forward. Before that, as you can see here, got a little Red Bull action. Now, anybody who knows me, they're like, Jibreel, you don't drink energy drinks that often, at least anymore. I used to be big on the Red Bulls, be big on the Monsters. Not so much anymore. I'm more of like a water coffee type of guy, but I went to a concert down in Seattle actually, and we were driving pretty late and needed a little bit of energy, so we bought some Red Bulls. I actually bought like a NOS for the first time in many years. Again, I'm 29. I'm not what I used to be anymore. So I can't just like be pounding Red Bulls like that anymore. But you know, I picked this up and I tasted it. Not bad. It's the Juneberry flavor. I don't know what a Juneberry is. I know blackberries, wildberry, all the raspberries. Never heard of a Juneberry before, so I didn't really expect the flavor profile. It's not bad. Still very artificial tasting. And that's the thing about Red Bulls, where it's like I don't feel like it's good for you, which is not a hot take, I don't think, but I feel like it kind of like saps off some of your life force. You know what I mean? Like you get a little bit of immediate perk up, but you definitely shave off like a couple weeks off the tail end of your life every time you drink one of these, which I don't know what is doing it in there, but I can taste the death sometimes. You know what I mean? Anybody who drinks Red Bulls, let me know. Do you also taste the death like I do? I don't know. It might be the taurine. I don't know what taurine is, but it doesn't sound organic. Maybe it is. I'm not a health food nut, particularly. But enough time wasted. Let's get into the books. ASM 31. There's also Legacy numbered 925, which I guess 25s are like special issues now. Where I feel like they do these special like anniversary issues, the oversized ones, like every other week now. But apparently this is a special issue for them. Now, before we get into the content of the book, let's get into the cover. Greg Land cover. Greg Land's a tough one. I know some people have issues with it. I wouldn't even say some people. A lot of people have an issue with his work at this point. Which, if you look at like What If Dark, the Gwen Stacy one that came out a couple of weeks ago, totally makes sense. Like the porn face tracing thing is nuts. So I'm not particularly into his work either. But I saw this cover, and it was a lot better than the cover that I ordered. I actually ordered this Kamala Khan blank space cover thingy or negative space that I was not into at all. Like the face on it looked crazy, and I felt bad because I actually ordered it through my LCS. Like they actually put in the order before the FOC, and it came and I looked at it and I was like, absolutely not. But I didn't want to buy two books. Not to mention, this is a $9.99 book. So like buying two, like I'm not going to do $20 on ASM in like a single week. That's crazy. Not to mention, in a couple weeks, there is going to be a reprint of 31 with all the jackpot covers that I am fighting hard not to buy some of those. So I was like, if I know I'm going to already buy another ASM 31 in a couple of weeks, I definitely don't want to buy two this week for two covers that I don't love. So I brought it up to the comic shop and I was like, please, can I exchange this? And they were totally really nice about it. And so I got this Greg Land cover instead, which again, I don't love. I have a lot of Black Cat covers, so I think it's going to fit in just fine. But, you know, it was a hell of a lot better than if you're curious, go on to like Comic Geeks or whatever and look up the ASM 31 Kamala Khan cover. Look at her face. Like, bro, I couldn't do it. So I was like, I have to exchange this. There's no way. So they gave me this cover, and it's fine. It's one of Greg Land's, I think, better covers in a long time. So I was like, you know, I'll go for it. But it's that same pose, man, that sitting on the roof thing. Don't get me started. So let's get into the content of the book. Overall, I thought this was a damn good Spider-Man book, to be honest with you, which is in some ways not surprising, but at the same time actually very surprising, considering that this was like a middling to not great run by most people's standards. I thought this book actually set up a lot of really fun stuff. So let's just focus on the ASM stuff, and then we can get into the non-ASM stuff that it kind of sets up, because this really is a Spider-Man book for all the upcoming Spider-Man stuff this year. This kind of sets up a whole bunch of stuff. It felt like, you know, those timeless books that they drop at the beginning of the year, or the tail end for the subsequent year. It felt like Spider-Man Timeless, where it's like all the upcoming Spider-Man related books that are coming out, like this is laying down the groundwork for them. So ASM, this is obviously leading into the gang war stuff. So you have Tombstone's daughter marrying Robbie's son. You got some really cool bachelor party stuff at the front end of it, which I've noticed a lot of people don't really like more emotional like ramifications of Peter's personal life stuff. I actually really do kind of like that stuff. I like the interpersonal relationship stuff. I love that you get to actually see some of the fallout emotionally of the Mary Jane Paul stuff, which I know the Mary Jane Paul stuff is super controversial. Everybody hates Paul. I understand why people hate him, because again, he is kind of like an obstacle character. Kind of like the sole reason he exists is kind of extending that Rabin storyline, and then also being, I guess, a reason why Peter and Mary Jane are not together. I don't really care whether Pete and Mary Jane are together or not. I just wish that if they were not going to do the Mary Jane thing, just double down on the Black Cat thing. And this book, unfortunately, did confirm what I figured was going to happen, which is like they're not going to give a really serious go to the Peter, Black Cat, or Felicia relationship whatsoever. It's been a number of issues that they've technically been dating, and the amount of time they've really even dedicated to it has been very, very minimal, which is very annoying, especially the fact that they spent a decent amount of time of like Peter trying to just reconcile the fact that he's not with Mary Jane anymore and his life is falling apart. It feels like they've invested more into a dead relationship than the very real current relationship that he had. But, you know, I do appreciate that they had a very mature adult conversation between him and Felicia, of just them acknowledging the fact that they're kind of going through the motions, and that in some ways he was using Felicia as a means to kind of get over Mary Jane, or at least buy time while he's not with Mary Jane, which I thought was a very adult conversation of them, where they can both acknowledge the fact that this is not really a great situation for either of them, and they're kind of wasting time, so let's just break up amicably. And I loved hearing kind of Felicia being open about like, hey, I want a relationship and I don't want to just be your project, and him, or at least Peter, having enough self-awareness to acknowledge that like she's totally right, and so to kind of just let things go, which is it was a cool exchange, but it was disheartening, because I was really hoping like, okay, if we're not going to do Mary Jane, that's totally fine. I really want him to seriously be in a relationship with Felicia. Do I think when it's all said and done that would last? Of course not. But I don't feel like they gave it a real shot. They had their little date that they were going to go on their little vacation for the issues that were not written by Zeb Wells, and then suddenly they arrive to the vacation spot and there is Mary Jane to insert. It's kind of annoying. I feel like there are certain things that are very obviously editorially pushed, so I think if it's not going to be Mary Jane's the one true and only, and so I don't feel like there's going to be any significant attempts. The last, I think, significant attempt at a relationship was back in the Superior Spider-Man days and stuff like that. So, you know, or before that actually, with the Carly stuff. So it's a shame, but that stuff was fine. The wedding getting interrupted was fun action. I like the action choreography there. I loved seeing the bachelorette party. It was so funny. And then, so yeah, overall, I thought it was a really solid book, and it got me pretty excited for the Gang War stuff, because I feel like, if anything, that was Zeb Wells at his strongest personally. That intro arc with Tombstone and the kind of interplay between the New York Underground and the Power Forces in Wilson Fisk's absence and kind of Rose being out of the way, I thought that was all really, really interesting and fun stuff. And so the fact that we're going back in that direction is great, because I obviously was not super into the time displacement Rabin stuff, and the stuff he did after with like Doc Ock was campy and fun, and I appreciate that, but this is definitely more my speed, so I'm very excited for this event. And so that's the ASM portion. We also have some stuff that kind of sets up stuff that are going to lead to Spider-Boy, and this one antagonist that is kind of trying to collect all these monster-inspired or animal hybrid people that she's trying to collect, and it ties into some older ASM stories. So that's going to set up Spider-Boy. That's all good and fun. That's kind of Dan Slott's jam there. We have Spider-Woman back now from the event that happened, the whole kind of Web of Destiny Spider-Verse stuff that you got in Dan Slott and Mark Bagley's Adjectiveless Spider-Man book. You kind of have the fallout of that. Spider-Woman is back finally. She's back in the Web of Life, or you call it, after kind of getting she wasn't killed, from what I understand. She was kind of like unwritten almost, so she's back now, and apparently she's like looking for her kid. So I'm very excited to see what that storyline is, and just her back into the fold. It feels like it's been forever. Get a little Aranya cameo in there as well. So that setup, you got some cool Kraven stuff, and him and surprisingly Queen Goblin kind of crossing paths, which is kind of funny. And I knew Kraven was going to make a reappearance in Zeb Wells' Spider-Man if you just look at the cover solicits. So that's unsurprising there. But yeah, overall, a lot of really fun stuff. And then obviously, one of the bigger things that I think are kind of set up that, again, if you look at the solicits, you knew this was coming, is Doc Ock heading back into the Superior Spider-Man direction. It's going to be written by Dan Slott as well. So I'm super stoked for that run. Obviously, the question that at least I had was, okay, they're going to have to do a little bit of finagling to get Doc Ock positioned to be the Superior Spider-Man again. Obviously, because he is in his normal body, Peter is in his normal body. How is this character going to come back? There's lots of guesses you could have. I don't think they're going to do the classic Superior Spider-Man thing again of booting Peter from his body, especially with the fact that we know for a fact that there is going to be other arcs happening in ASM at that point that seem to fully involve Peter. So I'm assuming we're going to do some kind of like cloned body thing. Could be interesting. I don't 100% know how they're going to do it. But I'm excited to see Superior Spider-Man back, and I'm glad that they're kind of laying the seeds there. It's going to be a number of months before that series begins, so we have a little bit of time, and I'm curious to see what other references happen in relation to Superior Spider-Man before now and then. So yeah, ASM 31, lots of words for it, but overall a really strong book. I think for the $10, considering the fact that you get so many writers, different artists involved with this, multiple different storylines, different books that are kind of building stuff, I was not mad at the price point. Let's get into another Spider-Man book. A really great book is Miles Morales' Spider-Man. Look at this gorgeous cover. This is also a variant. This one is kind of a two-tiered story that happens in this one. One thing, Cody Ziegler continues to kill it, and the art on it is just incredible. So I'm just so happy with this run overall. So the main thing is that he's facing off against Hobgoblin, and then you get more stuff about Hobgoblin trying to break out of Queen Goblin's, because I don't know if he was fully manipulated or just working on behalf of her and then betrayed. I don't know the full dynamic between them. I kind of forgot some of that stuff. But overall, you got Ben Kingsley trying to like break out of that whole situation there. And then lastly, the more compelling storyline of the two, I think, is some of the emotional fallout of a lot of the stuff that Miles has gone through, going all the way back to the Assessor days, which obviously ties into Beyond and all that. And just the mental ramifications of that. And if there's one thing I love in comics, it's when there are real consequences to what these heroes go through. I feel like a lot of times they go through really horrific stuff when you kind of look at it. And then when it's all said and done, they're kind of like, oh man, that was rough. But, heroes triumph at the end of the day, and then they kind of move on to the next arc. And so I like that with Miles. They've done a great job of calling back to those things. And it's like, yeah, that was really messed up. And it's having real effects for his ability to perform as Spider-Man. His spider sense is all off. And, he's entrusting all this into Starling. And I love that him and Tiana are still very much together. And she's supporting him and connecting him with the proper resources for him to get himself sorted out. I love that there's a callback to him actually becoming a better fighter through his time with Misty. I thought that was really, really cool. So overall, really strong series. I think right now Miles is in great hands, and I'm so excited to see where it goes going forward. Next one, we have a Contest of Chaos tie-in for Spider-Man. And I believe this is written by Stephanie Phillips. So I knew I was going to get it. It's a Spider-Man book. It's a Wolverine kind of book, and I'm big into X-Men. And also, it's written by Stephanie Phillips, so I was like, I'm down to check this out. I didn't really know what to expect, because I didn't know what Contest of Chaos was. I assumed it would have something to do with Agatha, just because of some of the solicits, and that was true. And this one actually kind of spins off of if it spins out of any book, it's actually the Midnight Suns run from, what was that, last year, I think? Something like that. Maybe early this year or last year. And overall, that was a pretty decent book. I did collect it. I have all 5 issues, I think 5 or 6 issues. And so kind of positions Agatha, and she kind of made an appearance not too long ago in the Scarlet Witch series, and there's a whole Darkhold thing. And so now we basically have Wolverine and Spider-Man transported to this new city that apparently is kind of like a dreamscape version of a real place, according to Wolverine. And they fight each other because they're both under the influence of this, this purple skull thing. I don't know the full context behind it. So they fight each other. It's an okay book. I'm curious to see where the Contest of Chaos thing is going to go. It's probably not going to be an event that I'm going to collect physically, but I might read it digitally throughout the major titles. I believe the next one's going to be in an Iron Man annual. So I think it's cool. It's not must read. It doesn't really tie into anything related to the Krakoa stuff with Fall of X because you have Wolverine there. It doesn't tie into Ben Percy's Wolverine stuff at all, and it doesn't really tie into Spider-Man at all. So if you're really only trying to collect things that are directly tied into the existing storylines, this is probably something you can skip. But if you're a completionist in any way, or if you're like a Spider-Man superfan like me, I think it's worth checking out. I don't think it's bad comics at all. Let's get into some heavy hitters. Immortal X-Men. This is what? Number 14. Continuing to be written by Kieran Gillen, one of the few series that I am so excited every month that it comes out to just get the cover A. Like, I very rarely get variants for this because I feel like the cover A's are so frequently like beautiful. And so this book was one that I was so curious about to see how it even exists structurally after the Fall of X, considering the fact that the Quiet Council doesn't even exist anymore. Krakoa as a nation has completely collapsed. And so obviously by the cover, you can tell that a lot of this is actually taking a look at Charles and him kind of dealing with the complete shock and grief of everything that happened. Obviously, he fully thinks that, and this huge spoilers, so to anybody who hasn't read it yet, newsflash, he thinks he killed all the mutants by sending them through the gates, as kind of Dr. Stasis and Moira kind of made him do that during the Hellfire Gala event. But also, this book is also kind of half of a Sebastian Shaw book, and kind of him and Selene dealing with the fallout of like him. He made a deal with Mother Righteous. He thought that he was going to actually own all of Krakoa. And apparently he owns the nation itself, but not necessarily the assets. So obviously he's pissed off about that, and he's trying to figure out a whole bunch of how he can position himself right to monetize all of this. That's his big thing, obviously, for anybody who knows Sebastian Shaw. Is he's just trying to find ways to be able to monetize this whole mess, which he's just sick. And it's kind of funny, him with Orcus, kind of him so willing and quick to just suppress his mutant. Like, he just has no loyalty to Krakoa and mutants whatsoever, which again is a very Sebastian Shaw thing. He's been kind of a scumbag since he made his appearance back in the Dark Phoenix days. And so the Charles stuff is very interesting. You kind of have a Charles that the very least he can do at this point is try to maintain what little dignity is left for Krakoa by fending off the Orcus agents by using this kind of like, I think he's mentally projecting monsters on the beach. And there was a really funny exchange where one soldier, and I'm paraphrasing here, was basically like, we can't get onto Krakoa because there's monsters on there, and Selene kind of like interrupts, is like, they're called mutants, like, don't be mean, basically. And this is what happens when you hire a bunch of bigots. And that was a really funny exchange. But no, he was literally talking about, like, as far as they're concerned, real monsters that are on the beach there. And so yeah, Charles is in full grieving mode, and then you actually find out that Hope and Exodus were able to move all the mutants. So they weren't meat grinded through the portals. They're actually moved over into the desert, basically. And you get a very obvious reference to the Moses Israelites through the desert stuff that from the Bible. That is a very obvious connection there. And so I'm very curious to see how that is. And you got kind of Exodus as this leader role of like, follow me to the promised land, and it's like, Hope, do you know anything? And then, obviously Destiny is an absolute mess right now because so much of what she does is obviously motivated by her wish to protect Mystique. And so if Mystique's out of the question, like, she in some ways feels like she has nothing to live for. So they're trying to keep Destiny together. Hope is like, what the hell is going on? Exodus, do you know where you're even leading everybody? And he's like, nope, but we have to have faith. So some interesting symbolism there, and I'm very curious to see narratively where that goes. But it is very interesting to know that over 200,000 mutants are still very much on Earth, and they weren't, and not everybody was like sent to Araco or whatever. So very interesting stuff there. Very, very good book. Next one I'm so excited for, and it was something I was very apprehensive about, but we have Children of the Vault. Now, the thing about it, and I wanted to give a shout out to the team that worked on this. This was a book that I wasn't sure whether it was going to work or not, because it's continuing some of the most compelling material from Hickman's X-Men run. And so I was a little nervous, at this point, we're years removed from that stuff. Like, is it going to work? And so I want to pull up the team really quick. So, yeah, we have Denise Camp, Luca Maresca on art, Carlos Lopez on colors, and then Corey Pettit on letters. They absolutely killed it. I thought this was a very, very solid book. Is it perfect? There's things that I don't love about it for sure, but overall I think they did a really good job about this book. Now, for you guys that don't know, these are basically a group of, I don't know what you would consider them. They're not mutants, and I forget what they call them. They're post-humans, I believe maybe is the term that they use. And they live in this vault, which is this kind of time displace. Like time moves super rapidly in there, and so like thousands of years pass, and they advance and they advance, and they have a huge vendetta on the X-Men. And for anybody who's been reading X-Men, you know that Forge has helped keep them basically in a dreamlike state, where they thought that they beat the X-Men. So with the whole collapse and everything, they're out now. And one of the first things they do to mobilize is basically like fixing the world, basically, and going all around and introducing all these advanced technologies. And everybody, they've kind of rebranded, and everybody has basically fallen in love with them and is trusting them. And so you basically have two of the mutants left on Earth looking to resist. So you have Cable, that was captured by Orcus. He breaks out because of oh my god, Bishop, there we go, I was forgetting his name. Bishop broke him out. And so you basically have a kind of a half buddy cop thing to kind of take down the Children of the Vault, and it's very interesting. It's not where I expected it to go. I knew that Cable and Bishop were going to make appearance. I didn't realize that it was going to be such again like a buddy cop type of thing where there's actually a little bit of humor to it. But overall, I thought it was a solid book. Do I wish a little bit that it focused more on the Children of the Vault and less so on Krakoa's response to that? Yes, that would be my preference. But overall, I think, they did an absolutely crazy good job for a book that I was not sure if they're going to be able to stick the landing, because again, they're stepping right onto Hickman direct stuff. Obviously, if you're writing in the Krakoa era, you're spawning off a Hoxpox, but this is a storyline that has only been touched very minimally. You got Hickman that set it up. You got Jerry Duggan did some stuff with it in terms of kind of having when Sync and Talon came back from there. You had Forge kind of keeping them at bay, and now you have Denise Camp trying it out. So I think he did a very good job with it. Let's get into some DC stuff. We have Night Terrors number 3. This is the mainline story for Night Terrors, so this is not a tie-in or anything like that. We have a couple tie-ins that we're going to get into later during the show. But basically, the general vibe of what happens here is you have Sandman working with Deadman, and then finally you got Damian Wayne making his reappearance and working with them. And finally, the Nightmare Stone makes its appearance, and so we're going to finally have some movement, and they're fighting against Insomnia's forces. It's cool. Like it's not bad at all. It's not blowing my mind here, but I think overall Joshua Williamson is doing a solid job on this event. I feel like sometimes I don't want to say too much, because one thing, I don't want to spoil it too crazy, because I know there's a lot of people there's a lot of stuff related to this event, and so I know not everybody is able to keep up week to week, so I don't want to spoil anybody, because it is a lot of material. But at the same time, a lot of the Night Terrors books have very similar vibes, so I don't feel like I have a ton of like unique thoughts for every iteration of it. So I think this is a solid book. I feel like this event is definitely going to read much better as a trade. But the problem is the way they're collecting it is super annoying. I think it's going to be over like 3 or 4 trades because there's so many tie-ins. So I feel like read the mainline stuff. You got First Blood 1, 2, 3, 4, and then whatever the last one is, Night's End or whatever. But whatever that last Omega issue is, read that, and I think you'll get everything you need. Some of the tie-ins are much better than others, like Detective Comics and stuff like that. Some of them are a little bit weighted in importance. That's like Zatanna, Wonder Woman, Batman, and then you have ones that have nothing to do with that are not really of any consequence, really. That's like Catwoman, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, Punchline. Those are very individualized stories, and I like them because you just get a little bit more of those characters. But I can totally see why somebody who's not into Night Terrors, this must be the most annoying thing ever, because so many titles are basically put on pause for 2 months. But come September, we'll get a whole bunch of new stuff. Wonder Woman by Tom King is starting. Fire and Ice is coming. There's a number of books. Oh, Birds of Prey is starting. So September will come back. A whole bunch of new series. Night Terrors will be done. Everybody will be back to scheduled programming. It'll be fine. But yeah, overall, pretty good book. Cool variant cover I got too. Let's get into the only other Night Terrors physical book I got is Zatanna 2. I love this cover so much. It's so cute. And so this book is cool. It's continuing some of the Zatanna and Robot Man stuff that we started in the previous issue. Kind of wraps that up. Again, not too much of consequence to the major stuff, but it was kind of, I forget what they called themselves, like Hex and Violence or something like that, their little team up name. And she was able to restore Robot Man back to his proper form. You get some cool stuff with her and her father. That is kind of, again, continuing what was set up last week, but you get Zatanna really broken down here, where it's just too much for her to deal with. And so yeah, overall I thought it was a pretty solid book. Again, if you're into Zatanna like I am, it's nice to have, because we don't get a lot of stuff with her. If it's not like Justice League Dark, there isn't really too much with Zatanna in it. She makes like quick appearances here and there. In some ways, like Constantine they use Constantine as the magic dude these days a lot more than Zatanna is when she's brought in, unfortunately. And so I'm just glad to get something with her, but it definitely feels like this is not just a Zatanna book. It's just as much as a Robot Man book as well. So, overall, not too bad, but again, I love this cover. Glad that I got it. Lastly, of the physical pull list we have is Spirit World number 4. Such a fun series by Alyssa Wong. I wish more people were reading this. I feel like this book is not being read too much. And I think it only has one more issue after this, which is kind of a shame. I would love to see this go a little bit longer. But for you guys that don't know, this is following character, and I don't want to butcher their name, but I believe it's Xanthi or Xanth, that is in the spirit world right now, dealing with just general spirit world stuff. Also, Cassie, Batgirl, was kind of dragged into stuff, and it's overall a fun series. Constantine is there, so if you like magic, if you like spirits and the paranormal, this book is definitely for you. I love all the Asian influence in terms of the imagery and stuff like that. So yeah, they're just doing a great job with this. Beautifully visual, very, very fast read. I've noticed it's not particularly dense in terms of like the conversations. It's mostly action, a lot of visual storytelling. So if you're looking for something that's very much an art showcase, just kind of a fun adventure to go through, you could probably blaze through this as a trade form, and I'm not joking, like 30 minutes maybe, 25-30 minutes. Like it's a quick read unless you're a really slow reader. So I highly recommend you check this out if you're looking for something very different than a lot of DC's offerings right now. There's nothing that they're releasing that feels like this, and it's part of that We Are Legends line that I think all three of those are pretty interesting. This is probably the one I like the most, then City Boy, then The Vigil. The Vigil's not really for me, but overall I like those titles and I hope they really do well. So quick Red Bull break. All right, what else I read? Got a bunch of digital stuff here. So let's just get into the Avengers number 4. This is a Jed MacKay joint. Continuing to kill it. I love the visuals of this series. It has that X-Men look to it because of the artist, but overall I think they're doing a great job. And it was really cool seeing the kind of concern in Captain America and Black Panther's faces in their conversation when they realized that like Thor and Wanda are getting washed, and I'm like, oh boy, like, because that's their heavy hitters. So I'm very excited what they're doing here and kind of splitting up the Avengers and having these threats that is really just decimating the Avengers. I'm very curious to see what the overarching narrative is for this, because I don't think they've really gotten into it. A lot of the stuff that was alluded to kind of early in the Avengers run, and then also with the Timeless issue, have yet to still happen. So Avengers number 4, really solid book, highly recommend it. We have Silk number 4. This is a pretty fun Silk volume, and it's kind of a shame because it's about to end in one issue. I'm like, man, they don't give Silk like a moment to breathe. And I totally understand how frustrating that could be for all you Silk fans, because I go through the same thing with some of my favorite characters, like Punchline. Wonder Woman has a continue, but like Wonder Girl, Nubia, a lot of my favorite characters only get these really short runs and these kind of periodic volumes. And Silk seems to be caught in the same thing. Now, thankfully, there doesn't seem to be a ton of time in between volumes. They come back pretty quickly. But I don't know why they don't give them a nice, like, extended run to kind of just see what they can do with it. But yeah, Silk number 4 continues to be a really fun series. She's out of her dreamscape now, and the character that is the main antagonist has kind of changed forms into this monster form. Her brother wants to save her, but at the same time doesn't want to betray her, and Silk is also trying to protect her little brother. So not a massive departure from what happened in the previous issues, but it continues to be a really good time. It feels very different. It does not feel like your normal street level Spider person stuff. So I'm glad that they went in a different direction there, and I'm excited to see what the implications are for this for Silk. It feels like the last 2 volumes of Silk they've really tried to differentiate her, tried to really dial into a lot of who Silk is as a person, the Asian background that she has. So I love that they're taking the opportunity to differentiate her and explore who she is that makes her different than a lot of the other Spider characters, because again, there's so many books right now. You got ASM, Adjectiveless Spider-Man, which is about to end. You have Miles Morales. We just finished a whole big swath of like Ben Reilly stuff. So there's lots of Spider-Person stuff going on right now. Spider-Man 2099 kind of floats in and out. So I'm glad to see them kind of doing something different here. Next one, Ghost Rider Wolverine Weapons of Vengeance Alpha #1. So this is kind of a Ben Percy mini event. From what I understand, there's going to be an Alpha issue, there's going to be an Omega issue, and then they're going to do 1 issue of Wolverine, 1 issue of Ghost Rider. And that will be the event. So it's kind of like a 4-part event. I like mini events because they don't, like, it doesn't go too long. So if you're not into it, like, you have to wait like a little bit, like maybe a month or 2, and then it's done. And I like those type of events. Overall, I thought this was really cool. So basically, you have this kid that is going around seemingly killing people because he's not in control of their powers. At least that's what we think so far. And then it kind of goes back to when Wolverine and Ghost Rider first, cross paths. This is Johnny Blaze's Ghost Rider, by the way. So for anybody who's curious, who's maybe not reading Ben Percy's run, it's still with Johnny Blaze. It's not Denny Ketch or anything like this. And basically, you have Wolverine still in the Winchester House days, and it's very much like Claremont era that they're kind of harkening back to there. And then you have Ghost Rider first getting his powers, something's wrong. They kind of go after the same kid who originally is brought to the house because they think he's a mutant, and then Charles looks into his head and finds out that he's not. And so this is actually really cool. It has a cool like horror vibe, and I love seeing that horror vibe being brought into the X-Men world in a classic type of way. Again, it feels very Claremont, very 80s. I'm loving what they're doing with this, and I'm excited to see. This is a crossover I think that makes a lot more sense. Sometimes we'll see these books kind of crossover, and it's like, okay, like I guess I could see it, but at the same time, maybe it feels a little jarring for one of the characters. This one, surprisingly, feels like it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's that synergy because you have the same author. Jerry Duggan's able to do it now Ben Percy's able to do it, and I like it because Ben Percy for Wolverine and X-Force have kind of felt like 1A and 1B of the same book, and so I like that this is going to kind of differentiate Wolverine, albeit for a very short period of time. So overall, like this book a lot, highly recommend it. Let's get into some quick Star Wars stuff. As I mentioned last week, I really did want to jump into all the Star Wars books more than the ones I was just reading. I've read a lot of the older stuff, like Kieran Gillen's Darth Vader run. I read the early Dr. Aphra stuff, but there's a lot to catch up on. So I was like, I just want to jump into the new stuff, and I'm using Dark Droids as a means to do that. And so Star Wars number 37 is my opportunity to do that. That's all about Lando and him trying to protect his friend, who's also a droid, former Imperial droid, and they know that the rebels find out that apparently he took over a ship and shot at something. They're going to dismantle him. So he's trying to protect his friend, and at the same time, he tries to take the Millennium Falcon so he can visit somebody, and he has to kind of slightly deceive Leia to do so. So overall, it was a super solid book. Again, because I'm jumping into things, there are certainly characters that I'm not super aware of that are definitely probably more showcased in the comics, and I don't really know them like that. But I was able to pull up enough context clues to understand what was happening. The next one, Star Wars Return of the Jedi Max Rebo #1. I think this is the 6th of the Return of the Jedi one-shot books. I read the last one that they did about the assassination plot for Mon Mothma. And so this one is about Max Rebo. And for you guys that don't know, he's kind of a background character that existed in the band for Jabba the Hutt's palace. And so basically you have this character, doesn't say too much, but basically has been exposed to so much violence throughout his life and really just kind of wants to see peace amongst those, and wants to see Jabba gone, but at the same time is not physically equipped to do anything about it. You have these 2 other characters that act as the drummers in the band, one of which has been convinced to finally kill Jabba the Hutt. The other one feels it's more of like a self-preservation stuff, like Jabba offers so much. Unfortunately, like they all acknowledge he's kind of a piece of crap, but he's kind of the economic base of Mos Eisley. So to get rid of him would have massive implications, and so they end up fighting each other, and Max doesn't want them to. And then it all kind of perfectly segues into the point where Leia in the kind of slave outfit kind of kills Jabba the Hutt. So it's a really fun thing where it kind of takes a random character and kind of brings them in and kind of just adds some extra context as to what was happening in Jabba's palace at the point at which he died in episode 6. This one shot feels a lot less consequential than the previous ones. Like, I don't fully know why this one was read, but at the same time, it was a fun read. I enjoyed it. Not too bad. Let's get into some fun DC stuff. We have the Superman 2023 annual. I thought this was a pretty solid book, nonetheless. Not too much to report from. It was a cool book. Unfortunately, it is not written by the same team that did the main run, so no Jamal Campbell here. But overall, no complaints. You get some cool Parasite stuff as they're working in, what is it, like Superman Inc. or something like that. You get some cool Livewire stuff and Mercy, and so it's doing a lot of context of what's going on. You get some Lois running the Daily Planet stuff. So overall, it's a fun complementary issue to otherwise a really, really solid run. I have to kind of look up some stuff to jog my memory on it. Overall, not mind-blowing, but still continues to be pretty fun. Let's get into World's Finest Teen Titans number 2. This was a really fun issue. So basically, they are responding to a call of this one person who is not in control of their powers anymore, and so it's kind of affecting reality around them. And so the Teen Titans have to. It's basically it's a fun teen story in where the main antagonist, if you want to call her that, her powers are out of control, and it's because of all the just general stresses and insecurities and doubt and depression that she's dealing with. And so it's a great kind of emotional roller coaster and analysis that they take the advantage to do. So, like Mark Waid writes damn good comics, and this World's Finest run continues to be really, really solid. It's a great additive to the other World's Finest Batman and Superman book that is happening right now. So overall, definitely recommend you check this out. Again, it's a very classic look at the Teen Titans. So if you're into, maybe you jumped into like a Rebirth or Young Justice or something like this might not be the type of Teen Titans that you're super into. I really love like 80s Teen Titans, especially like George Perez era type stuff. So this run is really doing it for me. So your mileage may vary, but overall I think it's really, really fun kind of classic stories here. We have 4 Night Terrors tie-ins this week, digital, that I read in addition to the other stuff. So super heavy on the Night Terror stuff, some of which I have more thoughts than others on. Night Terror's Green Lantern, not too much to report on. I didn't really read the Sinestro backup because, again, I'm not the hugest fan of what they're doing with Night Terrors in relation to Green Lantern, so not much of consequence there. Very similar thoughts to Night Terror's Robin number 2. They really just kind of wrap up what they were doing last week. They kind of finally are able to break out of their respective dreams, join together, and then break out, and they're back in the regular world now. That's pretty much what happens in the book. Night Terror's Shazam number 2, same deal, fighting against what is like a Billy Batson, Black Adam type of character. She breaks out, able to get the rest of the Shazam team together, get their powers back in by breaking into their respective nightmares, and then they break out as a team. And again, we're getting all the number 2s this week, so it's getting a lot of wrapping up of what happened in the last thing. A lot of these I feel like could totally have been done in basically a slightly oversized single issue, like Green Lantern, Robin. That could have been done in like a 33 episode or a 33 page single issue. Totally, there's no reason for 2 separate issues necessarily. And then lastly, we had Night Terror's The Flash number 2, and this one I actually liked a lot. The interesting thing about this one is that this one ties in very heavily, obviously, to the previous issue where he was trying to stop the death of Wally. And you get to see the physical changes that happen from him being in the Speed Force and kind of losing it and going through it so much. And you see the psychological effects of it, you see the physical effects of it, and it very much harkens back to some of the interesting stuff from the Flash movie that we saw. Again, this is not the Flash movie. I actually like this book a little bit more. But overall, I thought it was a pretty solid contribution to the Night Terrors line. Again, nothing of consequence to the overall like Insomnia story stuff, but And then lastly, we have Ed Brisson's Batman Incorporated number 11. I am very conflicted on this book. This is a book that I really liked when it started and has since kind of tapered off a little bit for me. It's not one that I fully feel like I'm going to drop because I feel like it's such an easy read. I love the visuals of it. There's really cool characters like El Gaucho and stuff like that. And so there's certainly stuff that I like about it, but I don't fully understand what they're doing anymore. Like, I understand that you have Batman Inc. and then you have Joker Inc., I guess you want to call it, of the different Joker characters that are kind of spawned around the world. There's lots of interplay between, like, relatives and what the different Batmen think about each other. And there's so many characters, and sometimes I have trouble even knowing who's who, and God knows where Ghostmaker is at this point, and you know, and where is Clown Hunter? I don't know. There's lots of stuff going on. I find it a little hard to keep track of what's going on, and maybe that's just my reading literacy. It could totally be a me thing, but overall, I would say it's a fine book. Again, it's something I would totally love to reread as a trade, so I can get that kind of continuous, like, okay, what was Ed Brisson trying to do over these two major arcs, because that's basically what it's been so far. And I really loved that intro stuff, and I love the idea of it kind of spawning out of that Batman annual. I think it was the 2022 annual, where Batman kind of brings everybody together and kind of signs them by team by their proficiencies and strong, and then kind of put Ghost Hunter in charge and stuff like that. So, you know, like, or Ghostmaker. So I thought there was a lot of very interesting start there, but then it lost a lot of steam for me. So, you know, Batman Incorporated is something I'm certainly going to keep my eye on, but it's not really doing it for me. So now that's everything I've read this week. Let's get into pick of the week. If there's one book I have to recommend for you guys, let's go through, you know what? I know what I'm going to choose. It's got to be Children of the Vault. Now, I know that might be super surprising because this is an Immortal X-Men week, and most weeks, as spoiler alert for you guys, most week that Immortal X-Men comes out, or like X-Men Red comes out, those are probably going to win that week. But I was super impressed by Children of the Vault and the fact that you get this almost Eternals meets X-Men vibe for it, and Denise Camp is not a writer that I was like super familiar with before, and maybe that's a fault on my own. I just didn't really know what to expect, and I thought they knocked it out of the park. And there's nothing better, I think, than a pleasant surprise. Like, it's great to have a book that is consistently amazing, like Immortal X-Men. Shout out to Kieran Gillen. He almost like never misses for me. But I think there's something to be said for a book that you didn't really know what to expect. I wasn't even necessarily originally planning on picking this up. Flipped through it, looked solid, and then ended up going home and reading it, and I thought it was great. So I always like when there's kind of like a pleasant surprise. And so let's get into the last section of the show, and this is reading Rex for next week. So we're gonna have an absolute banger week next week, and the first one I'm gonna talk about is Daredevil number 14. Now, the interesting thing about Daredevil this run, as I believe this is the last. Yeah, I'm just checking. This is the last issue of Chip Zdarsky's run on Daredevil. And we're going to be getting a new team. And I believe it's Saladin Ahmed that's going to be taking over, I think, in September, which I am stoked for because I loved Saladin Ahmed on Miles Morales. And it was one of those things where, like, eventually I was like, okay, let's get some fresh blood on the title. And that's when, you know, Cody Ziegler bumped in. And so this is a perfect time. I think Chip Zdarsky, I love his Daredevil run. At the moment a omnibus comes out, I'm going to be jumping on it. But at the same time, I feel like after Dark Reign, was it Dark Reign? Something like that. Yeah, Dark Reign, that event. I feel like that was kind of everything he needed to do. And then from that point onwards, it felt a little bit of like the spinning the wheels. Like, again, Daredevil continues to be an amazing book, but I definitely liked that first half of it than the kind of renumbered second half of it, that last 14 issues. That first half was a lot stronger, and so I feel like it's probably been a bit where we've kind of gonna get like a new person's take on Daredevil. He's done his thing. I think we're talking about like well over 50 issues, right, that Chip Zdarsky has done on Daredevil. So he's done his thing. Again, I think it's gonna go down as one of the better Daredevil runs in my opinion, especially, you know, modern Daredevil. Obviously, there's the classic stuff. You're gonna have the Brubakers and the Bendis and the, you know, stuff like that. But I think overall, like, this is definitely gonna go down as one of the more solid new contributions to the Daredevil lore. Batman Superman World's Finest number 18. I won't bore you with singing its praises any more than I already have in the past. Continues to be an absolute classic book, so go check that out. Spider-Man number 11, I believe this is going to be the end of this specific line of Spider-Man. This is adjective list, so this is Dan Slott's run on Spider-Man. As you guys know, it's going to kind of split off. You're going to have some Superior Spider-Man stuff by Dan Slott, and then you're going to have Spider-Boy. And so this is kind of set all that up, so we're going to be ending here. So I say if you're a Spider-Man fan, check it out, especially if you want to see kind of the end of this respective book. I think, and again, this latter half has been really Spider-Boy focused, and kind of Spider-Man with his powers all wonky. They've tied up most of the storylines that were even introduced in this book, so there's not much places for them to go at this point. So I think it's a good place to end. You have X-Men Red number 14. Al Ewing joint continues to be one of the best books that Marvel is putting out right now. I believe this is going to be the formal beginning of what they're calling the Genesis War. As you know, she kind of returned to Arakko from Amenth. You get I would imagine Apocalypse is going to make a reappearance soon. So you're getting some really big Arakko stuff here, and I'm very excited to see what Genesis does in relation to the fact that now Arakko is almost fully... Like, there's a lot of heavy hitters on there, obviously, like Storm and stuff like that. But there is no Krakoan backup now. Arakko can't recruit Krakoa to help them out now with all the Fall of X stuff. So I'm very excited to see kind of what happens and what Arakko looks like after Genesis. What I would imagine is probably going to win and kind of take control of the Circle. You have Uncanny Avengers number 1, some more X-Men stuff. I'm very excited about this because this is, I think, going to directly answer some questions related to that Captain Krakoa stuff that we saw on Free Comic Book Day. And in Uncanny Avengers, some of those... This is where the Avengers were pulled out of the Hellfire Gala and kind of there's like a false flag operation. I think this is going to tie into that. So I think this run should be pretty fun. We have Dark X-Men number 1. I'm totally going to be picking this up physically. I have a really cool cover that I also bought, I believe with Psylocke on it, if I'm not mistaken. Or wait, no, that's not Uncanny. I actually got one with Madeline Pryor. And again, any Madeline Pryor fans, anybody who has been looking for the reemergence of Havoc, it's been a while since you're going to get some really cool stuff with this, and I'm very, very hyped about this. I've been looking for like a darker X-Men run, and I love when they play around with different tones in the Krakoa era. And so I think, and the Fall of X, I think, is a perfect time for them to do this. I'm so excited for some of these newer books like Dark X-Men and Uncanny Spider-Man and stuff like that. So definitely check out Dark X-Men number 1. We have Night Terror's Wonder Woman number 2. You're getting some more Nubia action in this and the Well of Souls and stuff like that. So for you Wonder Woman fans, definitely check this out, especially because this is in between the end of the last run and the beginning of the Tom King era. And so this will tie you over for some cool Wonder Woman stuff. And then lastly is an absolute sleeper hit. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on this series, but it is very early. Only number 2, Hawk Girl. Number 2 was surprisingly good, and so I'm very excited to check out to see where they go from here. It's yet another Dawn of DC banger. So check out those books. Those are the ones I recommend for this week. And that was another episode for the week of August 12th. I'll be back next week with another episode. And for you guys who have made it this far, just as a heads up, I'm going to be having multiple upcoming discussions with different creators. I've already connected with a couple, and I'm going to be scheduling those soon. So keep an eye out for those. These episodes are going to continue weekly unless I, for whatever reason, take a break or a vacation or something technical happens. I expect these to continue on the week to week. The conversations will be supplemental material, so watch them if you're interested. And again, if you're interested in making an appearance in an upcoming episode or discussion of this show, let me know. Hit me up down below, message me, hit me up on TikTok. There's lots of avenues in which you can do it. So till next time, this is Jibreel from Jibreel Talks Comics. See you guys.